There is a moment, a single unguarded moment. It lasts less than a second, and yet it says more about a human being than 1,000 hours of polished conversation ever could. It happens before the mind can compose itself, before the mask has time to settle back into place, before the careful architecture of image and reputation can be rebuilt. In that moment, something true escapes. A flicker in the eyes, a tightening of the jaw, a word spoken too quickly to be edited. And if you are paying attention, if you have trained yourself to watch, rather than merely to listen, you will see it. You will see who someone actually is, not who they have spent a lifetime convincing you they are. We live in a world of performance. Every day, people walk around wearing versions of themselves that have been rehearsed, refined, and repeated so many times that even they have started to believe the performance is the truth. Politeness becomes a costume, kindness becomes a transaction, confidence becomes a shield, and most of us, most of the time, only ever meet the costume, the transaction, the shield. We shake hands with the performance and never once touch the person underneath it. But character is not what a person shows you when they know you are watching. Character is what escapes when they forget that you are. Tonight I want to talk to you about 7 small, seemingly insignificant moments, 7 micro-triggers, that strip away the performance in an instant and reveal, with startling clarity, exactly who a person really is, not who they claim to be, not who they present in interviews, on stages, in wedding speeches, or on curated feeds. Who they actually are, underneath all of it, when the pressure is just enough to crack the shell, but not enough to warrant a rehearsed response. But this speech is not simply about learning to read other people. That would be useful, yes. The ability to see through pretense is a form of wisdom that will protect you from being fooled, exploited, or blindsided by those who are skilled at wearing masks. But there is something far more important buried inside this idea, something that most people miss entirely. Because the moment you learn to recognize these 7 triggers in others, you will inevitably be forced to turn the mirror around. You will start to notice these same triggers in yourself. And that is where the real transformation begins. Not in judging others, but in awakening to your own unguarded moments, and choosing, deliberately, consciously, again and again, to become someone whose truest self, the one that emerges in the cracks, is someone worth being. This is not a speech about suspicion. It is not about becoming cynical, or treating every person you meet as a puzzle, to be solved and exposed. That would be its own kind of poverty, a life spent hunting for flaws instead of building connection. No, this is a speech about awareness, about depth, about learning to see beneath the surface of human behavior, in others and in yourself, so that you can move through this world with your eyes fully open, and so that you can build a life and a character that does not crumble the moment no one is looking. Think a moment about the people you trust most deeply in your life. Chances are you did not come to trust them because of a single grand gesture. You came to trust them because over time, in 1,000 tiny moments, they proved themselves consistent. They showed you, without ever announcing it, that who they were in private matched who they claimed to be in public. That consistency is rare. It is rare because it requires something most people are never taught to value, the discipline of behaving with integrity, even when integrity offers no visible reward. And now think of the people you have learned to be cautious around. Chances are, that caution did not arrive because of one dramatic betrayal, but because of a small crack you noticed, a flash of impatience towards someone powerless, a flicker of resentment when a friend succeeded, a subtle unkindness that slipped out when they thought you weren't paying close attention. You noticed it. Some part of you filed it away, even if you could not name it at the time. That is the quiet intelligence of human perception at work, and tonight we are going to sharpen it, together, on purpose. What makes this subject so powerful is that it operates in both directions simultaneously. As you become more skilled at recognizing these 7 triggers in others, you will find it increasingly impossible to ignore them in yourself. This is not coincidence. Awareness does not stay conveniently confined to observing other people. True awareness always eventually turns inward, because the same eyes that learn to see clearly in the world will inevitably learn to see clearly within. And that is the greatest gift this knowledge has to offer. Not the ability to spot weakness in others, but the invitation to strengthen what is unfinished in yourself. So, let us begin. Let us walk together through the 7 moments that reveal a soul. The first trigger is this. Watch how someone treats a person who can do absolutely nothing for them. Not the boss, not the client, not the person who holds the keys to the next promotion, the next deal, the next opportunity. Watch instead how someone treats the waiter who forgot part of the order, the stranger who cannot help their career, the elderly person moving slowly in the grocery line, the child who has nothing to offer but noise and needs. This is where the performance usually stops, because the audience that matters, the audience of influence and consequence, is not present. And in that absence, something honest emerges. There is a certain kind of person who reserves their warmth exclusively for those who can benefit them, and their coldness, their impatience, their quiet contempt for those who cannot. This is not a small flaw. It is a foundational truth about a person's inner architecture, because kindness that is transactional is not kindness at all. It is strategy wearing kindness as a disguise. True character reveals itself in generosity toward those who will never repay it, in patience extended to those who cannot advance your position, in respect given freely to those that it has taught us to overlook. Think about the last time you were in a hurry, distracted or stressed, and someone with no bearing on your success crossed your path. A stranger asking for directions, a co-worker outside your department seeking a small favor, a family member calling at an inconvenient time about something that mattered deeply to them but not to your immediate schedule. Your response in that moment, unfiltered by strategy, was a direct readout of your character. Not your character on your best day. Not your character as you would describe it if asked in an interview. Your character as it actually exists, moment to moment, when convenience and virtue are placed on opposite sides of a scale. And here is where I ask you to turn inward, because this speech is not for you to simply nod along and think of someone else's face. Ask yourself honestly, how do you treat the people who cannot do anything for you? How do you speak to those who serve you in small, invisible ways throughout your day? How do you treat someone the moment you realize they hold no power over your future? If the answer makes you uncomfortable, that discomfort is not something to run from. It is the beginning of growth. Awareness is always uncomfortable before it becomes liberating. Consider building a small private practice for yourself. At the end of each day, recall a single interaction you had with someone who could offer you nothing. A cashier, a passerby, someone unfamiliar and unconnected to your ambitions. And ask yourself honestly whether the version of you that showed up in that moment was someone you would be proud to call your truest self. This is not about performing kindness as a new kind of strategy, checking a box to feel virtuous. It is about slowly, patiently, retraining your instinctive response until warmth toward the powerless becomes not a decision you make, but simply who you are. The second trigger is this. Watch how someone reacts when they do not get their way. Losing, being told no, having a plan disrupted, watching an outcome slip away despite their best effort. These moments are pressure tests for the soul. Under pressure, the polished exterior thins, and what lies beneath begins to show through. Some people, when denied, respond with grace. They accept the disappointment, they process it honestly, and they move forward without collapsing into blame or bitterness. Others, when denied, reveal an entitlement that had been hiding beneath their charm the entire time. A belief, quiet but deeply held, that the world owes them a particular outcome, and that anyone who stands in the way of that outcome deserves punishment, manipulation, or contempt. Watch how a person handles losing a game, missing a promotion, being corrected in front of others, or having their idea rejected in a meeting. Do they absorb it with humility, curious about what they can learn, or do they immediately search for someone to blame, some external force, to hold responsible for their disappointment? This single reaction tells you almost everything about a person's relationship with responsibility. And responsibility, my friend, is the foundation on which every strong character is built. There is a particular kind of maturity that only reveals itself in defeat. Anyone can be gracious while winning. Grace during victory costs nothing, because pride and satisfaction make generosity easy. But grace during loss is expensive. It requires setting aside the ego's desperate need to protect itself, and choosing instead to sit with disappointment honestly, to extract whatever lesson it holds, and to release the rest without contaminating your relationships with resentment. This is one of the rarest qualities a person can develop, and it is also one of the most magnetic. People are drawn, instinctively, to those who can lose without becoming bitter, because it signals a kind of inner stability that feels safe to be around. Now, bring this mirror back to yourself. How do you respond when life does not go your way? When your effort is not rewarded? When someone else receives the recognition you quietly hoped would be yours? Do you allow that moment to reveal bitterness, or do you allow it to reveal grace? This is not a question you answer once. It is a question life will ask you again and again, in different forms, for the rest of your life. And each time your answer shapes who you are becoming. The third trigger is this. Watch what someone does when they believe no one is watching. This is perhaps the purest test of all, because it removes the audience entirely. No applause to win. No reputation to protect. No image to maintain. Just the raw, unwitnessed choice between doing what is right and doing what is easy. Does a person keep their word when breaking it would carry no visible consequence? Do they tell the truth when a lie would be simpler and undetectable? Do they treat someone with dignity even when that person will never tell anyone how they were treated? There is an old truth, older than any single teacher or tradition. That character is what you do when no one is looking. It has been repeated so often that it risks becoming a cliché, a phrase people nod at without truly absorbing. But sit with it for a moment, really sit with it, and you will realize how radical it actually is. It means that your truest self is not the one you present at work, at church, at family gatherings, or on the version of your life you choose to display to others. Your truest self is the one that exists in private, in the choices made in solitude, in the small acts of integrity or dishonesty that no one will ever witness or reward. This is why some of the most respected, admired people in history built their reputation not on grand public gestures, but on a lifetime of small, unwitnessed choices that eventually became visible simply because they were so consistent. Their character was not performed. It was practiced quietly for years until it became undeniable. There is something almost sacred about the choices we make in private, precisely because they carry no external incentive. When you are kind in public, the world can reward you for it, with approval, with reputation, with the quiet social currency of being seen as good. But when you are kind in private, when integrity costs you something and no one will ever know you paid it, that choice belongs entirely to you. It cannot be taken, imitated, or performed by anyone else. It is the purest evidence of who you actually are, uncontaminated by the presence of an audience. Ask yourself in this moment of honesty, who are you when no one is watching? Do you cut corners you would never admit to? Do you speak differently about people behind their backs than you do to their faces? Do you keep the promises that carry no witnesses? This is not a question meant to shame you. Every human being has fallen short of their own private standards at some point. The question is not whether you have ever failed this test. The question is whether you are willing to notice and to choose differently the next time the test appears. The fourth trigger is this. Watch how someone responds when they are corrected or contradicted. Few things reveal insecurity faster than being challenged. Some people, when told they are wrong, receive the correction with curiosity, even gratitude, because they understand that being wrong is not a threat to their worth, but an opportunity to grow closer to the truth. Others, when corrected, respond with defensiveness, anger, or subtle cruelty toward the person who dared to challenge them. Their identity is so tightly fused with the idea of being right that any contradiction feels like an attack on their very existence. This reaction reveals something profound about a person's relationship with their own ego. A person whose sense of self is secure can hear "you are mistaken" without feeling annihilated by it. A person whose sense of self is fragile hears "you are mistaken" as "you are worthless" and reacts accordingly, with hostility, with excuses, with an urgent need to restore their sense of superiority, sometimes by diminishing the very person who offered the correction. There is a subtle but important distinction worth making here between confidence and rigidity. Confidence says, "I trust my judgment and I am also open to discovering I was wrong." Rigidity says, "I must be right because being wrong feels unbearable." From the outside, these two states can look remarkably similar. Both may present as certainty, as strength, as conviction. But beneath the surface they are opposites. Confidence can bend without breaking. Rigidity shatters the moment it is tested and often takes relationships down with it. I want you to notice something here because it matters deeply. The people who grow the most in life are not the ones who are rarely wrong. They are the ones who have learned to welcome being wrong, because they understand that every correction is a doorway to becoming wiser than they were a moment before. If you want to measure your own growth, do not measure how often you are right. Measure how gracefully you respond when you discover you were not. The fifth trigger is this. Watch how someone treats those who have power than they do. This is the trigger that separates true strength from mere dominance. Anyone can be respectful towards someone who holds power over them, a boss, an authority figure, someone whose approval they need. That kind of respect is easy, almost automatic, because self-interest enforces it. But watch how someone treats an employee who cannot fire them, a younger sibling who cannot defend themselves, an animal that has no voice at all, a person clearly overwhelmed or vulnerable who has nothing to offer and no leverage to demand better treatment. Power, real power, does not reveal itself in how a person treats their superiors. It reveals itself in how a person treats those they could mistreat without consequence. This is one of the oldest and truest measures of character across every culture and every era of human history. Not how you climb, but how you treat those beneath you on the way up. A person who uses power to elevate others is building something lasting. A person who uses power to diminish others is building a monument that will eventually collapse under the weight of its own cruelty. History offers us countless examples of this truth, and so does everyday life if we simply pay attention. The manager who is warm to executives but cold and dismissive to entry-level staff is not, in fact, a warm person. They are a strategic one, and strategy is not the same thing as character. The friend who is attentive when you are useful to their social standing but distracted when you are not is not, in fact, a loyal friend. Power does not create character flaws that were not already present. It simply removes the incentive to hide them. Turn this mirror toward yourself once more. When you have influence over someone, in a workplace, in a friendship, in a family, in any relationship where the balance tips in your favor, how do you use that influence? Do you use it to lift or do you use it to control? This is one of the most important questions you will ever ask yourself, because the answer shapes not only how others experience you, but who you ultimately become. The sixth trigger is this. Watch how someone reacts to someone else's success. Few things expose the health of a person's inner world more clearly than watching them witness another person win. Some people feel genuine joy when someone they know achieves something meaningful, a promotion, a recognition, a milestone, a dream realized. Their joy is not diminished by comparison, because their sense of worth is not built on being better than others. Other people, when confronted with someone else's success, feel something colder settle in. A subtle resentment, a need to minimize the achievement, a quiet search for the flaw in the story so that the success feels smaller, less deserved, less threatening to their own sense of standing in the world. This reaction is rarely about the other person at all. It is almost always a mirror turned toward the observer's own unresolved relationship with their own potential. A person secure in their own path can celebrate another's victory without feeling diminished by it, because they understand, deeply, that another person's light does not require their own to dim. A person who has not yet made peace with their own progress will often experience someone else's success as an accusation, even when none was intended. There is a beautiful kind of freedom available to those who learn to celebrate others without reservation. When you no longer need to measure your worth against another person's achievements, their success stops being a threat and starts being evidence. Evidence that what you are striving for is, in fact, achievable, that the path you are walking has been walked before, that good things are still possible in the world. This shift from comparison to celebration is one of the quiet miracles of emotional maturity, and it changes not only how you treat others, but how peaceful your own inner life becomes. I want you to notice how you feel the next time someone close to you achieves something you have also been striving for. Notice the sensation in your chest before your mind has time to compose a socially acceptable reaction. That sensation, whatever it is information. It is not something to be ashamed of. Envy is a deeply human experience, and pretending you never feel it will not make you a better person. But awareness of that envy, honesty about its presence, is the first step toward transforming it into something more useful. Inspiration instead of resentment, motivation instead of bitterness. The seventh and final trigger is this. Watch how someone treats you after you can no longer offer them anything. This is perhaps the most quietly devastating test of all, because it often only reveals itself after significant time has passed, after a job has ended, after a relationship has changed, After your usefulness, your status, your resources, or your relevance to someone's life has diminished. Some people remain loyal long after the practical benefit of the relationship has disappeared, because their connection to you was never about what you could provide. Others disappear almost instantly, the moment they sense there is nothing left to gain, revealing, in their absence, that the warmth they once offered was never really about you at all. This is a painful truth to sit with, because it often means re-evaluating relationships we once believed were built on something deeper than convenience. But this pain, difficult as it is, carries a gift inside it: clarity. It teaches you to recognize, moving forward, the difference between people who value your presence and people who value your usefulness. And it teaches you something even more important. It teaches you to examine your own behavior in the relationships where you hold the advantage. When someone can no longer benefit you, do you remain present? Do you honor what once existed between you, even if circumstances have changed? Or does your attention quietly redirect itself toward whoever appears most useful next? Loyalty that survives the disappearance of benefit is one of the rarest and most valuable qualities a human being can possess. It is the quality that turns acquaintances into lifelong friends, and colleagues into people who will show up for you decades after the professional relationship that first connected you has ended. It cannot be manufactured or faked convincingly for long, because time itself is the only test capable of proving it real. Now, having walked through these 7 triggers, I want to bring you back to the deeper purpose of everything we have discussed tonight, because the true value of this knowledge is not in becoming a sharper judge of other people. It is far too easy and far too shallow to use these insights as a weapon to walk through life cataloging the flaws of everyone around you, feeling superior each time you catch someone failing one of these tests. That is not wisdom. That is merely cynicism wearing the costume of insight. The real gift hidden inside these 7 triggers is this: they are not just a lens for observing others. They are a mirror for observing yourself. Every single one of these moments, how you treat those who cannot benefit you, how you respond to losing, who you are when no one is watching, how you receive correction, how you treat those with less power, how you feel when someone else succeeds, how you behave once your usefulness fades. These are not abstract philosophical questions. They are happening in your life right now in ways both large and small, almost every single day. And here is the profound truth beneath all of this. Character is not a fixed trait you either have or do not have. It is not something decided once in childhood and then locked into place forever. Character is built, moment by moment, choice by choice, in exactly these small, unglamorous instances that no one else may ever notice or reward. You are not judged, in the deepest sense, by your best day, delivered on a stage in front of an audience who is cheering for you. You are defined by your most unguarded moments, the ones that happen when the applause has stopped, when the cameras are off, when there is nothing to gain and no one keeping score. This means something extraordinary. You have the power, every single day, to shape who you are becoming, simply by paying closer attention to these small moments and choosing deliberately to respond to them with integrity rather than convenience. You do not need a grand transformation. You do not need to wait for some dramatic turning point in your life to become a better version of yourself. You only need to notice the next small moment, the next time you are tempted to be dismissive towards someone who cannot help you, the next time you feel the sting of losing and must decide whether to blame or to grow, the next time you are alone with a choice that no one else will ever witness, and choose in that moment the version of yourself you actually want to become. This is what true self-awareness looks like. It is not simply understanding your emotions in the abstract. It is watching yourself in real time, in these ordinary, unremarkable instances, and having the courage to be honest about what you find. Self-awareness without honesty is just self-flattery, and growth without honesty is impossible, because you cannot improve a version of yourself you refuse to see clearly. I want you to understand something important. None of us pass every one of these 7 tests perfectly, every single time. To claim otherwise would be dishonest, and this speech is not about achieving some impossible standard of moral perfection. It is about direction, not perfection. It is about becoming someone who, more often than not, chooses patience over contempt, humility over defensiveness, Generosity over resentment, loyalty over convenience. It is about becoming someone whose unguarded moments, more and more over time, look like the person you are proud to be, rather than a stranger you would not want anyone to see. This is the quiet, unglamorous work of building a real character. Not the kind performed for an audience, but the kind that exists whether anyone is watching or not. It will not be praised on a stage. It will not trend online. Most of the moments where your character is truly tested will never be witnessed by another living soul. But they will accumulate, silently, over years, until one day the people in your life will describe you, not by what you said about yourself, but by how you consistently made them feel safe, respected, valued, trusted. That description, earned in silence and built in the smallest of moments, is worth infinitely more than any reputation you could construct through performance alone. So here is what I ask of you, starting today. Begin to notice these 7 moments as they arise in your own life. Notice how you treat someone who cannot benefit you. Notice how you respond when a plan falls apart. Notice what you do when no one else would ever know. Notice how you receive correction, how you treat those who depend on you, how you feel in the presence of someone else's success, and how you behave once a relationship no longer serves your convenience. Do not judge yourself harshly in this noticing. Judgment only closes the door to change. Simply observe, with honesty and with compassion, and allow that observation to guide you gently toward becoming someone more aligned with your own deepest values. This is the real awakening, not a dramatic singular event, but a quiet ongoing practice of watching yourself in the unguarded moments and choosing again and again to become someone whose truest self is also their best self. Not perfect, not flawless, but honest, growing and increasingly at peace with who they are when no one else is looking. Because, in the end, the world does not remember people for the masks they wore. It remembers them for who they were underneath. In the small kindnesses no one saw. In the integrity they maintained when it would have been easier not to. In the grace they offered, even when grace was not required of them. That is the character that outlasts every performance. That is the character worth building. You do not need permission to begin. You do not need a perfect set of circumstances, a fresh start, or a dramatic turning point to justify the change you are seeking. All you need is the next moment, ordinary, unnoticed, unremarkable to everyone but you, and the willingness to meet it honestly. That is where a life is actually built. Not in the speeches we give about who we want to become, but in the quiet, unwitnessed instant when we choose it. So, carry these 7 moments with you. Let them live quietly in the back of your mind, not as a checklist to judge others, but as a compass to guide yourself. Let them remind you, gently, again and again, that you are always becoming someone, and that the someone you are becoming is shaped not by your intentions, but by your choices, especially the small ones no one will ever see. And it begins quietly in the very next unguarded moment of your life.